I've seen the footage of
You've seen footage of
shredded children's bodies. And that's my taxpayer dollars. They're going to bomb those kids.
So I think we should kill them all, if that makes you feel better. Everybody
It's another good example of how someone who has a misunderstanding of the evidence which exists in reality then can go off half-cocked calling for the death of others instead of having to be like put on the spot and say, explain to me step by step why you believe this untoward thing that you just expressed there openly in public, Congressman. Because if you go over to my Twitter and you were to search for anything I've tweeted about Mr. Ogles, you'd see that he's one of many who has repeated some Hasbara in the past week, and I have not found the source evidence. The IDF doesn't seem to have anything on it. I went to various places looking for the evidence where they were asking about it. I did find that there are no innocent civilians. There's a lot of that footage out there, but there's more innocent civilians. Oh, here it is, because he did the meme. Last week, we had a 3-part series breaking down and, how would you say, dismantling Bibi's Hasbara, the propaganda last week. Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, spoke last Sunday, and he repeated some things in the first 5 minutes that there has never been evidence presented since 10/7 of these things, but all of a sudden it's grandiose and hyperbolized in a very specific way. And then it was repeated by Mr. Shmuley, and then it was repeated by this congressman, and I'm going to provide you with a receipt right now for that claim, because here it is. Now, I'm clicking the picture that's on Congressman Ogles' site. This is his official profile. This is an official post. It was posted February 21st, 2024. And I'm going to read the first 2 paragraphs here, because it doesn't get much better after that for him. Representative Andy Ogles, quote, death to Hamas, end quote. When accosted by a pro-Hamas activist, so that wasn't a pro-Palestinian activist, it was a pro-Hamas activist, apparently, on Capitol Hill last week, I stated, in reference to the Hamas terrorist group, quote, you know what? I think we should kill them all if that makes you feel better. Everybody in Hamas, end quote. Second paragraph. On October 7th, Hamas committed atrocities that are beyond normal comprehension and a manifestation of evil here on earth, including the rape and torture of infants. They have evidence of raped infants, they're claiming. The rape and torture of young girls and boys, the rape and torture of men and women, including the cutting off of women's breasts while they were alive and being gang raped, the mutilation and removal of men's testicles, and of course, the slaughter of innocent lives. Now, Tony, I ask you, you have been here on the show. We have looked at hundreds of hours of evidence during this public evidence gathering and understanding of the situational effort. I have never seen anything that substantiates many of the claims in paragraph 2. They are not necessary to make an argument. They're not necessary to continue the funding and the bombing and stuff like that. What essential elements are they providing this type of content for? Because we're going to look at other examples of this type of stuff, Shmuley being the penultimate to Bibi Netanyahu's claims. But what did you think?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Max Blumenthal has done a phenomenal job at the Gray Zone, debunking this entire myth and really going against the New York Times. And I forget the specific journalist who penned that awful article that, you know, supposedly, in fact, utilized the tragic death of that young woman. And I don't know if I forget if he appropriated the language or made up, or no, he surreptitiously contacted them and then sort of didn't give them his true intentions of how he was going to report on it. And of course, it took a social media post by, I think, the sister of that young woman, you know, in other words, when one tries to research the claims, one finds very little evidence to support the more extreme and outlandish claims about rape and, you know, beheaded babies and mutilated, you know, testicles or something like that. None of those seem to be true. I'm not saying that did not happen, but again, extraordinary claims require, you know, actually extraordinary evidence, and there hasn't been any evidence except for mostly hearsay, completely. So we know on the grounds the facts are very mercurial, not well parsed out, at least from what the IDF is reporting on. Hold on real quick. Come on, Kitty. No. That's a back.
Look at the bikes. Look at the bikes they're riding, Tony. More war trophies from the people they conquered.
And then let's not forget, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but at the same time, in my fallacy course, I did present a fallacy that for I think a lot of people and for everyone, it should be so commonsensical. It's like, why would one need to make this fallacy explicit? And it's called the ad nauseum fallacy. Repeat a lie enough times to the point in which it becomes nauseous. The idea, though, is sort of Joseph Goebbels style, Adolf Hitler from Mein Kampf, the big lie, a concept from Adolf Hitler, which is if you can tell a big enough lie enough times, people will end up believing it. And obviously, propaganda minister under Goebbels, under Hitler, utilized that to great effect. And so has many great tyrants and dictators in history have done the same thing. The control of language through lying repetitively has a marked effect on human consciousness, sort of like a behavioral effect that many of the behaviorists studied as far as animal and biological behavior. So there is, although it seems so trite and obvious, oh, that's just a lie. Keep telling it. Keep telling it. Keep telling it. They have no facts to fall back on. In this case, they only have one thing they can do is win the war and win the propaganda over time somehow. And that's their, as we mentioned last week, they're full steam ahead in regards to just doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the lies and the Hasbara, and they're not going to stop. They have no recourse to actual truth here. And they obviously know this, so they have to continuously build straw men and specious arguments and appeals to emotion and all forms of just fallacious rhetoric. And when one does that, that means they don't have truth on their side.
Yeah. I mean, tone deafness has become a problem of immense proportions, and everybody who's taking action is doing so thinking they already know enough to take that decision, action, judgment, etc. I don't know very many people that are ordering like books on the topic and trying to read what you don't already know about these things, right? I've
How
already
much is
done,
APAC paying that particular congressman? Maybe he knows
dude.
and he doesn't care because I've been watching a lot of The Wire lately. But we just finished. We're at the end of the third season. I'm like, oh yeah, now I remember how corrupt everything on every single level.
Well,
Just a
there's
little bit of blackmail, a little bit of payoffs, a little bit of leverage here and there on from the smallest level on the street to the largest, up to the judges and the courts, and you know that
the
sort of
Israel
thing.
lobby has been taking it hard on the interwebs because now people have figured out like there's everyone like I've seen
That's
more
good. Good. I'm glad to see that. That's
labeling
great.
of people's dual citizenship and all this sort of stuff. Like Congressman Massey, let me see, I'll find it in a second.
Mm.
Massey took a poll this week. It was a 24-hour poll, and it said, do you think that dual citizens should be allowed in Congress or something to that effect, right? And it was like overwhelmingly
Hmm.
and you would not have seen that had the 10-7 self-defense response gone on for 4 months. So there was a point, like there was a couple
Interesting.
months,
Yeah. Good.
nobody
Good
was saying
observation.
anything about it, the APAC
Right.
or any of that type of stuff. All of a sudden, after 4 months and 30,000 bodies stacking up, you see people popping off, and it's like, here's the corporate logos of all your congressmen, and they did it in the parliament last week. They put up flags, like all the Israeli dual citizens in their parliament. They have flags. I said, this is how it should be. It's just like NASCAR. They have to declare their sponsors, and you should know who's voting for your stuff and why they're voting for the stuff the way they are. Makes things a lot less like ambiguous for
Right.
folks when you
Right.
do it like that.
Indeed.
Uh,
That's good. That's good. Hopefully there'll be some response, some pressure put on the politicians to be like, look, you can throw all the money you can at us APAC, but we're under pressure from our constituents at this point. There is leverage if one can organize constituency in order to put pressure on their, believe it or not, they still have to get the votes. And right now it's messy to be able to completely contrive the entire thing, although they did it arguably last election. So,
yeah, I mean,
and actually in the last midterms too. But
and this is not an advertisement for Denzel Washington's movie Man on Fire. This is an actual person who allegedly today set
is
themselves
that a
on
real
fire.
photo?
Yeah, it's been going around all day. The
Yeah.
reports of this, that this is a protest to free Palestine, and that this is a Marine who, and his quote was, "I will no longer be complicit to genocide." And
Now, what
yeah,
was the
that's
first one that was made famous in the 60s, right? During Vietnam
well,
when
there,
those
yeah, there's
Buddhist
the
monks or
monks. There,
something.
yeah,
Yeah. Let me see if
I
I can
mean
pull that up because
and
that's for the
that's a famous video
monks.
of that dude sitting down and
Yeah. And they did it like very, very impersonally. There wasn't let me see if I can find it out there.
stuff,
That
man.
was, yeah, that was.
It's tough. And then then there's all this sort of stuff that's going on out there, and this would not be going on had it not been such an egregious response in relation to 10-7. And I don't think the hyperbole and all this other stuff they're doing is helping their public image out there, because you know it's quite spicy. It's quite spicy, and I don't want people to start jumping to conclusions like, they definitely have an influence, but now that you got AI generated everything out there, like they can make a bigger deal out of stuff. It's more of an emotional impact than usual is being circulated out there. And I want people to like keep calm, cool, collected. Don't jump to conclusions. Weigh your evidence, look for sources, try not to get caught up in the hoopla. However, you got to check Hasbara at the door. If you see some stuff on there that's poisoning the minds of other people, give them a reference so that they can have comparison and contrast. It might be their first chance to actually have consideration of this topic from more than one perspective to be able to improve their views in the world, because a small percentage of people are open to learning, and they will learn the bigger narrative because bigger frames of reference eat smaller frames of reference. So when you have someone who's like, well, after after this such and such date, but they don't include like the first half of the book of the story, that's a big part of the problem right there. Everyone's like, oh, well, the Arabs have always turned down our peace offers. It's like, is that after you moved into their territory and reappropriated their property? That's a reasonable response if you see the bigger picture. But everyone wants you to have an irrational response, and so they don't want you to read the first half of the book. It's very much like Tragedy and Hope, where they just take away the first half of the book, and then you really don't know what's going on. You got to go with the current thing. Everybody goes with the country that flies the first Zionist Congress flag from the 1897, and everything's kosher and okay then. Until you start looking at the other side, and then you're like, oh, I'm supporting genocide and ethnic cleansing. It's not so good. All right, so this next media block, this comes from a YouTuber. His name's Corey Gill Schuster. He walks around Israel and he asks questions. And in this one, you're going to get to hear like, is it helping that they're killing Palestinians? Are they preventing terrorism in the future, or are they creating more terrorism in the future? Almost as if they need terrorism as a justification to keep existing. A point we might continue to flesh out through tonight's episode. So let's go to this first block, and then we'll have another clip from Katie Halper and Sam Seder. Well, he made the show. And then Turkish World TV for another clip outside the U.S.
אוקיי, את חושבת שלהרוג אלפי אזרחי פלסטינים בעזה ימנע טרור פלסטיני בעתיד?
אני חושבת שאחרי מה שעשו לנו, אנחנו לא במצב של לחשוב מה ימנע ומה לא ימנע. אנחנו קודם כל צריכים לעשות, ומה שהצבא צריך לעשות שיעשה.
מה הוא צריך לעשות? כאילו מה...
הוא צריך להראות שיש פה מדינה שדואגת לאזרחים שלה, ומי שזה לא מתאים לו, אז שיצא למאבק במדינה שלו. אנחנו לא צריכים לדאוג, לחשוב מה הבעיה עם הפלסטינים.
אוקיי, אבל מי ששואל את זה, זה לא אני, מישהו מחול, שואל את זה, הוא אומר, להרוג המון אנשים, זה לא יעזור.
אוקיי, אנחנו לא הורגים אזרחים, אנחנו מגנים על עצמנו, אנחנו הולכים כדי להרוג את המחבלים, ואזרחים שלא מתפנים ונשארים במקום, יכולים לקרות גם טעויות ולמות, כן, אין מה לעשות.
זאת אומרת שיש להם הזדמנות ללכת, כאילו במקום אחר?
יש להם הזדמנות ללכת, מלא הזדמנויות ללכת, ומי שלא הלך, זה או כי לא נתנו לו ללכת, או כי הוא נשאר שם מבחירה.
מה, מי לא נתן לו?
הכיתה שלנו הגיעה. החמאס. החמאס.
אתה חושב להרוג אלפי אזרחי פלסטינים בעזה ימנע טרור פלסטיני?
כן.
כן?
כן, כי אני חושבת שאין שם אזרחים שהם תמימים. כולם איכשהו קשורים לפשעים. הם יכולים להסתיר אצלם בבית חטופים, הם יכולים...
אבל זה כאילו נקמה. מה אם ימנע טרור מהם, כאילו בעתיד?
אם אולי נהרוג אותם, הם יפחדו.
הם יפחדו?
כן.
אוקיי. הם אומרים שלא, דרך אגב, אבל לא יודע, כן.
אני חושב שלא משנה מה יקרה, לא תצליח להיות אהבה בין העמים, וצריך לעשות הפרדה, שהם יחיו במקום שלהם, אנחנו נחיה בשטח שלנו, ככה יהיה הכי טוב לכולם.
אבל ככה זה היה כאילו בעזה לפחות.
לא, אבל יש המון ערבים שהם בתוך הארץ, וצריך לעשות את ההפרדה.
גם מישראל, גם אלה מיפו?
כן.
יפו?
כן.
אבל מה נעשה? כאילו, איך עושים את זה?
לעשות מדינה של ערבים, מדינה של יהודים.
בתוך שטח מדינת ישראל?
כן.
אתם לא דיברתם על זה?
לא מסוכן.
אוקיי. אז איך אפשר לעשות את זה? נגיד שאתם חייבים, איפה אתם גרים? כאילו, פה בתל אביב. אז יאללה, אנחנו זורקים אתכם מהבית שלכם? אנחנו מעבירים אתכם? כאילו, איך?
כן. או שאנחנו נעבור.
לא, אמרתי, שאתם תעברו?
כן, שמישהו אחד יעבור לשטח אחר, שטח שונה, שטח חדש, ותהיה הפרדה.
נגיד שזה באירופה במקום? זה ככה פרו-פלסטינים הם אומרים. שגרמניה צריכה לתת.
אז שהם ילכו לאירופה, כי רוב אירופה זה מוסלמים, אז עדיף שכל המוסלמים ילכו לאיפה שהמוסלמים. פה זה מדינה של יהודים.